Shalom Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live, and friends, this evening is going to be pretty much a very sensitive subject once again, discussing the situation down on the border of the United States, the children that have been detained without their parents, of those families that have come to the United States illegally. And once again, as we stated in our broadcast yesterday, we do not support illegal immigration, and we do support President Trump sending these families back, those that need to be sent back to the respective countries that they actually have come from. But at the same time, though, we realize there is a much bigger issue at play here. This is one reason why we said we do not side either Democrat or Republican or independent or any other party in this particular situation that's happening. And in fact, if anything, this is only a trial run for what is going to be done in the near future to us as well, our own families. And this is why I caution you before you make such harsh criticism here because of your love for President Trump, which I also have had great hopes that he would be a true president that would really make a change in this country, especially bringing about peace, ending the war in Syria, making peace with Russia, so we don't end up in a big major catastrophe here. But the more that I see what is going on, the more I have realized that President Trump is very much on course for a new world order, just like all the other presidents in the past have been as well. And I think once you see some of the information I'm going to share with you today, it may even cause you to realize what's really going on in this world. And this is what we have to look at. Again, you know, as guys know, I am not here to pat people on the back and make them feel all fuzzy on the inside. And of course, if you do not want to support this ministry because you do like your ears tickled, then I understand. I have no problem with that. I'm not here to try to make excuses. I'm only here to tell you the truth. And that's what I'm going to do to the best of my ability. Let's get right into it. And I wanted to start off with the very video that I did yesterday because some people came and made such comments there that, well, Steve, you're for illegal immigration. You just want our country overrun. No, I did not say that. And I did say I agreed with President Trump in sending them back. Even President Obama, who many like to criticize about this immigration policy to begin with, he sent back 2 million illegal aliens back to their country while he was president, although his last 2 years he allowed more in. And there are those that are saying that actually it was Bill Clinton that actually brought this law in 1997. There's a lot of dispute over whether or not that's really true or not. We're going to get more into the facts, but first let's look at what I did say, because it was obvious some people never listened past 4 minutes of the video and immediately decided to criticize, thinking that, well, you know, you just don't like President Trump. I think you need to hear, though, more about what's going on. We're going to talk about the advisors, the spiritual advisors to President Trump as well, to kind of get a better idea of where the administration is actually headed. Listen to what I said, though, yesterday, just briefly. When he was talking about the dilemma on the immigration, is that you're weak, the country is going to be overrun with millions of people. I'm not for the illegal immigration whatsoever. If you're going to deport the people, that's perfectly fine. I understand that, but deport them as families. They came as families, they should return as families. There's what I said. As I stated there, I'm not for the illegal immigration. My point is keep them together as families. Now, I realize that we have that little loophole in the law that states that you cannot keep the children detained no more than, I think it is 20 days, something to that effect, or maybe it's just a matter of 48 hours. I forget the exact timing that you cannot keep these children detained. But the thing is President Trump, when he went to the zero tolerance policy, he began to try these people as criminals as well, therefore confiscating all of their children. But you know, have you ever thought that perhaps this could be only a trial run for a new world order, for things that are going to change in the very near future, not just for disarming this nation and taking away your guns, but what about when they make it absolutely mandatory forced vaccinations and you have no more say-so, no more religious exemption, no nothing. We're going to give the vaccines to your kids whether they get autism or not, or whether or not they flop around on the floor or have all types of adverse effects from these vaccines, which, by the way, we're going to talk about that because they have been forcing vaccines on these children that more than likely would be deported in the first place. Again, just more guinea pigs. And then we'll go back during the time of Obama's administration and the mass graves that were found also. Yeah, neither Democrat nor Republican is going to scathe by on this here. There is an agenda. And unfortunately, too many of us are too blind to see what the agenda really is. I want to take you, though, to Dave Hodges next, the Common Sense Show here. And Dave says here, it's about a 5-minute video, but I'm not going to play the full 5 minutes. I want to play just a little bit of this video here for you so you can hear a little bit about what Dave Hodges had to say about this issue as well.
Come for you, bad boys, bad boys. Well, that day could come when they come for you. Let me tell you what I'm really disturbed about. Number one, I don't approve of what Donald Trump has done with regard to border detention. Oh yes, he should be detaining all people, men, women, and children who cross the border illegally. We need to know who's coming into our country, and they need to be coming in the right way. However, he's opened himself up for criticism. He's opened himself up for charges of being a Nazi. He's made a mistake by separating children from their parents. House them all together. Who cares? Deport them all together. Let them come back in the right way. But nonetheless, folks, what we are looking at here.
And there again, Dave Hodges sees that same thing. You know, deport them all together, but keep them all together. Listen, if you can take and erect these tent cities, if you can also take and have all your Walmarts that have been handed over to the federal authorities there to be able to use as this, as we also know, FEMA camps that have been built all over the United States can be used as detention centers. We have them staffed. We have them ready to go. After all, President Trump also made that little joking remark, well, I don't think it was really intended for this purpose. Well, or something of that nature there. Well, who are they really intended for then? Actually, Americans more than likely is the actual point. Listen a little bit more of what Dave says.
Is something that is a portent of things to come. And it's a lot more than detaining illegal alien children. It could have to do with detaining people like you and me. Hi everybody, this is Dave Hodges. I'm the host of the Common Sense Show, and we are the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, when we take a look at what's happening in these detention facilities, separating children from families, like I said, I don't like it, and I've said why I don't like it, but there's another much more dangerous situation. I covered in exquisite detail in 2015, during Jade Helm 2015, when the Walmarts closed for very bogus reasons. Oh, we have restroom problems. All at the same time?
Yes.
You want to talk about being full of shit? There you go, right there. But nonetheless, despite that figurative and literal reference here to the lies that Walmart told, what they did do is they converted these Walmarts into FEMA camp detention-ready centers.
Exactly, and of course, as we know too, and we covered that ourselves, as well as we also covered in depth about how the Border Patrol was also way scaled back and we're allowing all kind of illegal immigrants to come in. Unchecked, uncensored, you name it, it all happened. Now, I do appreciate that when President Trump, maybe his initiative is to come in and to try to stop the illegal immigration coming in the country, but not so much the illegal immigration, but he also was trying to make sure, from what it looked like originally, was to keep out all the Arabic people from coming from around the world, the refugees from the countries that we were over there blowing up the entire countries. It's really frustrating, guys. But anyway, let me get more to the point here about what's going on here. Let's look at some more things that are happening. Trump retreats on separating families, but thousands may remain apart. This is another issue that troubles me as well. that we have all these families here that are being separated. The children are being separated from the families, but we're also dealing with a situation that they may not ever be able to repatriate these kids back to their parents. You know, we've already got mothers that have been released that can't find their kids. They don't know where they are. And so this is a very troubling situation. You know, and I know that many of you guys, you write to me and you say, well, you know, Steve, if these parents came here illegally here, they need to be arrested, you know, and they're being criminals. They need to have their kids taken away. You know, we're not dealing with the situation that happened here in Germany or in France or in Sweden, where migrants came in from war-torn regions, in some cases not even war-torn regions, but came in. The majority, probably 90%, nothing but men. They came to Europe to rape and pillage the people here in Europe, to send terrorism, part of a New World agenda that was happening here. Look at even the situation on the seas right now in the Mediterranean as these men from Africa are coming in as illegal immigrants here and being allowed in some cases not. And of course the crime is on an upheaval, unprecedented. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about families from Mexico coming. Yes, if they need to be deported and come in the right way, I understand that. I support that because we do need legal immigration in this country. I did make the very clear analogy, though, as well, is that we're none of us, as far as our forefathers, unless you are part of the Native American families there, none of us came in invited in this country. Didn't matter if we were from Europe, Spain, or France, the British Kingdom, whatever it may be, and even the Chinese, the Japanese, etc., every nationality that is not a Native American, most of us, I say most of us, never came in at the invitation of the Native Americans that lived here to say, we would like to welcome you in our country. But on the contrary, we did very much of the same of what we see going on in the Middle East today. Wars and ravaging and destroying the country and the Native Americans that were here, driving them out. The trail of tears that was given to the Apache Indians that crossed the country and the other tribes that joined with them to be forced to go to some desolate land that was not their own land. You know, that seems to touch a nerve as well. And I'm really perplexed by this when I say things like this. Why does that bother people when you stand up for the Native Americans? You know, okay, many of our forefathers that did come here, and of course I did make the mistake when I associated Christopher Columbus and discovering of America with the Mayflower. By the way, I could not believe, as I said, I drew a blank on my grandmother's maiden name, but her maiden name was Burleson. And yes, one of her grandfathers was actually on the Mayflower. No, not sailed by Christopher Columbus. I kind of knew that, but I had so many lockups in the brain at that moment, I couldn't get my story corrected there. Nonetheless, though, as we move on, I want to share some other things with you. The parents choosing to bring their children illegally into the U.S. should take some responsibility. Now, this is from, let me just let you listen to some of the statements that are made here.
I don't think anybody has been able to think that far in advance, excuse me, but that is something that I have been concerned about. This is just a Band-Aid, a quick fix to appease the Democrats who are launching in mainstream media attacks on our president. We have a law, and it's called, we have borders, and you aren't to be here illegally. We have a process for people coming in legally. Really, the fault, as a parent of 2 children, a daughter of an immigrant, you know, parents have to take some responsibility. Just like we expect parents here in this country to have responsibility caring for their kids, and when we don't, Child Protection Services steps in. There's no difference between that and what's going on at the border. And these parents took it upon themselves. I don't know what the Democrats expect, to have a sweeping, okay, let's just let everybody in. As we know, 10,000
Now, the one thing that troubles me here, just like it was in the case when I actually brought the issue in, is that it's assumed that the Democrats, and I could really care less what the Democrats think when it comes to their political ideology either, nor the Republicans. But the point is, I don't even think the Democrats are interested in the mass immigration illegal immigration coming to the United States. No, deport them. Yes, we should do it the right way. That is true. But what type of crime have these people committed? Especially from the southern countries there. These people are destitute and desperate. You know, they traveled with their families. We don't know what they went through. And that's what the immigration policy is all about. In fact, under Obama and under Clinton, they had what they called the catch and release policy. Yeah, they captured you, they put an ankle bracelet on them, and you had to wait for your immigration hearing. And then if you did not follow with that, they came and found you by your ankle bracelet and they deported you. Or if you did not get your asylum, then you were sent back to your own country. Obama did deport 2 million people back to other countries while he was president. Or I shouldn't say he deported them, the government deported them under his administration. So yes, he did deport a lot of people as well. A heck of a lot of people, I might add. But there again, if you notice, this young lady here she is a Republican, Michelle McCrory. Debbie Aldrich tells Michelle McCrory is what it says here. But she's once again, though, justifying the fact that if you come here illegally, you're going to lose your kids. Well, that wasn't always the case in other presidencies either. But nonetheless, they did it too. I agree. And these camps have been there with Walmart for some time, and these children have been housed even before President Trump became president. But President Trump has been president for over a year and a half now. You know, I would have made this priority to stop this practice. But you know what? Nobody could do anything about it. It took somebody with the courage to go forth and try to do something to make a change in this. Now, of course, these Democratic congressmen go down there and to help get it in the spotlight because Trump does have a zero tolerance policy that is affecting even more families. I did listen with my wife to one particular interview where they were speaking about this issue, and of course the attorneys that were working for the state representing these people here said that their caseloads had quadrupled. They said used to they handled maybe 35 cases a day. Now it was 75 in the morning and 75 in the afternoon. Unprecedented number of cases being dealt with, and this is over the separation of the children of the families. So since President Trump did the zero tolerance, and this is what the man was talking about, it has just skyrocketed in the number of separations. Now, let's continue on though. We also have here Melania Trump, who actually goes down. They call this an unexpected visit. This is BBC covering it, but CNN, they had it in their comment there that it was an unexpected visit down to the Texas, one of the Texas detention facilities at the border. Well, they make it look really nice. I don't know of any president, especially his wife, that is going to go visit any location that is unannounced. The Secret Service always shows up plenty of time in advance to make sure their safety is guaranteed. Now, maybe it was only 24 hours, so therefore they could call that unannounced. It wasn't like it was a pre-planned trip months in advance, but it gave them time to make some changes if necessary. But anyway, let's listen a little bit. Now, here's one thing that's interesting too, and I know that a lot of people that support President Trump are not going to be happy about it, but the president's wife, the first lady, did board the plane going down to Texas with a jacket from Zara that said on the back, "I don't really care. Do you?" Now, let's say it was just an honest mistake, but it's still a very serious mistake for the first lady to wear some kind of jacket like that going down to the southern border over this situation. But I do appreciate her words that she says here, which I do want to share some of those words with you here as well.
Recognize each of you and thanking you for all what you do. for your heroic work that you do every day and what you do for those children. We all know they're here without their families. And I want to thank you for your hard work, your compassion, and your kindness you're giving them in these difficult times. I'm here to learn about your facility, and which I know you house children on a long-term basis. And I also like to ask you how I can help to these children to reunite with their families.
To help reunite the children. Like I said, that's a nice thing and everything, but it is a problem. And I'm glad to see that President Trump did sign the executive order to stop separating these families. And think about it. If he could sign that order and put the stop to that, then it could have been done even before his administration. It could have been done under Obama's administration. As I said, if they can make all these detention centers, they can also make these detention centers to also house the migrant families that come in illegally to start with. Or your FEMA camps that you have planned for Americans in the near future, you could have been practicing there all along as well. This also is another interesting issue right here. Immigrant children forcibly injected with drugs at Texas shelter, lawsuit claims. June 20th, 2018. That was one of the big issues I was already concerned about. What about the vaccines? Was that actually happening? Because after all, not everyone in the United States agrees that vaccines are safe. In fact, there are a huge number of doctors that are against the vaccines, and there have been over 50 doctors that have lost their lives in the span of 2-year time. 2-year time, doctors lost their lives, naturopathic doctors that oppose the vaccination of children because of the health risk to the children, and were outspoken critics of these vaccines. Well, they all mysteriously died. Well, the thing is, as I said, we may end up having our own children taken away in the very near future if you do go against a vaccination policy, something that the government is making trillions of dollars off of through big pharma and all these vaccines and stuff like that. Anyway, children held at the Shiloh Treatment Center, government contractor South Houston, that houses immigrants, minors, describing being held down and injected according to federal court filings forcibly. President Donald Trump's zero-tolerance policy is creating a zombie army of children forcibly injected with medications that make them dizzy, listless, obese, and even incapacitated, according to the legal filings that show immigrant children in U.S. custody subdued with powerful psychiatric drugs. What's going on? Like I said, what I'm saying, you guys have no idea, because there's more to this than meets the eye. And now we're going to get into that sensitive issue as well. All right, now, what I really wanted to do, because, you know, there's some things that I see that goes on inside of President Trump's administration that I do appreciate. Like, for example, he was being criticized in mainstream media because several of his administration staff, including the Vice President Pence, attend a weekly Bible study at the White House. Well, I'm actually glad to see something like that. It's exactly what we do need in this country. We need God back in the country. We need God back in the government. We need God back in the schools, the Bibles, etc. I don't oppose anything like that. I do appreciate that President Trump has done that. But there is something, though, that did concern me, because when I begin to look at this whole situation and we think about the way things are going and how this whole problem started with these children, I begin to think about President Trump's spiritual advisors. By the way, there are a huge number of them. Who's who of Trump's tremendous faith advisors. And so I begin to go down through them. Some of them I actually know. Not so much directly, but indirectly. Michelle Bachmann on here. Michelle Bachmann has written me several times. I do know Michelle via email. Also, Dr. James Dobson. I know Dr. James Dobson. He actually wrote the commentary on the back of the book Yom Suf that I wrote, as well as the book Israel, Are They Still God's People? He actually liked both the books that I wrote and endorsed it and allowed us to use his photograph and talk about him in the book. And in fact, out of all of his spiritual advisors, probably Dr. James Dobson is the only one that I felt like might be a decent advisor to him. But you have a lot of big names. You have James Dobson, you have Jerry Falwell, you have Richard Land, we also have Paula White, we have Kenneth and Gloria Copeland. Boy, that's probably a familiar name with you guys, with me. You have Mark Burns, you have James Robinson, you have Ronnie Floyd, and the list continually goes on and on. David Jeremiah, we have Jack Graham, you have James McDonald, we have Jay Strack and Michelle Bachmann. And like I said, the list is just Ralph Reed, and so much goes on and on and on and on. These are his spiritual advisors. Now, some of them no longer in that capacity, but these are some of the lists that are on here. And A.R. Bernard, and Robert Morris, and every one of these people from mega churches and huge, gigantic ministries, with the exception of one that I know of, come from huge backgrounds. But then I got curious, though. You know, because I got to thinking about this. You know, my wife often has a saying, you know, they may sit there and yell at each other and hate each other there publicly before us, but in behind the scenes, they're all out there drinking martinis and joking around with one another, and they're best buddies behind the scenes. Well, you know, there's some truth to that, because we know when President Trump got elected as president and they went to that big dinner that the Catholic Church sponsors for them, Cardinal Dole, who happened to be there, sat right there and in between him and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton also being Donald Trump's cousin. And after all, they joked around as if they had been best friends all along. Not to mention, Donald Trump has stated that he felt more a Democrat at heart than he does a Republican. And of course, why not? He was a Democrat to start with. He only changed to be a Republican, I guess, when the time was convenient, knowing that he would run for president in the near future. And you can't say that it wasn't pre-planned, because we can go back to when he was a young man, always talking about running for president with big celebrities, about what he would do if he were president. But then I decided to start doing some serious tracing of the facts here to see what really goes on in behind the scenes of all these spiritual leaders. And as I said, I finally got tired of just researching it when I saw the common core connection between them all, except James Dobson. James Dobson openly wrote under his own particular Dr. Dobson, he actually had written, he was on, you know, when he's the founder of Focus on the Family. Now, he's no longer founder of Focus on the Family, and it was actually the man that runs Focus on the Family that actually wrote the letter, but Dr. Dobson agreed with the letter, calling for them to put another pope in the Vatican. That's how much he disagreed with Pope Francis. It doesn't mean that he's not also linked up with the Vatican. And I'm bringing this out because Pope Francis is very much for a new world order, a one world religion, and also a new global economic system. Keep that in mind, because Donald Trump's spiritual advisors are all headed down the same path here. Focus on the Family asked Vatican for a new pope. That's what James Dobson did right there. They wanted a new pope October 23rd of 2013. Now, I'm glad he was saying that, because that happened to be right before the pontiff was going to be crowned to be the new king of Israel. He would become the prince in essence of Israel. That prince that so many people call a Jewish prince. By the way, a Jesuit can't be a Jesuit unless he's got Jewish bloodline. Not to mention his family being Italian, Roman descent. We've gone into that before of ours, who is the Antichrist. And I'm not saying that Pope Francis is the Antichrist. I don't really know who it is as of yet. But the thing is I do believe the Vatican will have a major role in who the Antichrist really is, coming out of their system one way or the other, whether it be a pope a bishop, a cardinal, or even a lay member of their society. But I expect it to come directly from them. But on the other hand, you have the other spiritual leaders, as was mentioned in the article I shared with you, Kenneth and Gloria Copeland. The story behind Brother Copeland's papal visit, as we know from Tony Palmer, as I've shared with you, and he is a spiritual advisor to President Trump. Well, it doesn't end there. We also have this man right here, Mr. Robinson, another spiritual advisor to President Trump, high-fiving the Pope as they spoke about the need for that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I agree with that as well, but I wouldn't be high-fiving the Pope. And again, I'm not against Pope Francis. He's a man. My desire would be that God would open his eyes to recognize that the system that he is in is totally corrupt and would come out of it. As God says, come out of her, my people, and be not partakers of her sins. So it shows that there's an open door for the children of God to leave. But then you also have this one here. The Christian Observer pointed out, Hillsong, Ronnie Floyd and Lecrae unite with Pope at Monumental Together 2016 gathering. Ronnie Floyd, again, another spiritual advisor for President Trump. Okay, then you have President Trump's evangelical advisors seek to tamp down Vatican criticism. Evangelical advisors of President Trump have requested a meeting with Pope Francis to quell criticism from Vatican allies over the political direction of American Catholics. The dispute began when Catholic and Presbyterian leader close to the pontiff accused conservative American Catholics of forming a Christian alliance of hate with evangelical fundamentalists when they support Trump. In July, prominent Jesuit journalists published with the Vatican's approval criticized conservative U.S. Catholics for joining what is described as a political radicalization of conservative evangelicals. The authors of the article accused of the groups seeking political expedient alliance to promote a nostalgic dream of theatric type of state and a xenophobic and Islamophobic vision that wants walls. Now, the thing is, if you look in here, Johnny Moore and evangelical advisors to Trump and a board member of the National Association of Evangelicals sent a letter to Pope Francis requesting the meeting on behalf of some of the U.S. evangelical leaders, including those close to the president. He sent the request at the Archdiocese of Washington and other intermediaries on August the 3rd. Rather than being offended, we have chosen to attempt to make peace, Moore says. And again, Moore, another one. Jack Graham was going to be a part of this as well, who is also a spiritual advisor to the president, and Samuel Rodriguez Jr., and also Ronnie Floyd, again, another spiritual advisor to the president, all seeking links and making sure their connection with the Pope of Rome is really good. And then we have right here, former Trump campaign faith council member of the First Baptist Dallas pastor Robert Jeffress on President Trump meeting with Pope Francis. Listen to what he has to say in this particular interview.
Robert Jeffress, a former Trump campaign faith advisory council member and a Fox News contributor. We're always happy to see you, Pastor. Thanks for coming on. I got to ask, to use a Southern phrase, these two gentlemen have had some words in the past. Were you shocked, as I was, to see how well they seem to get along?
No, I wasn't shocked at all. I have been in meetings. In fact, I moderated a meeting one time between President Trump and some never-Trump religious leaders. And they came in, David, all prepared to give the president a piece of their mind. And by the time it was over, he had disarmed them, he listened to them, and they were eating out of the palm of his hand.
Wow.
So I wasn't surprised at all that the Pope and the president emerged as BFFs. And they were willing to turn the other cheek.
This is a business channel, Pastor, as you well know, and what intrigues us most about this relationship is the Pope's critique of capitalism. Because I understand the Catholic Church's views on materialism, that's not the road to happiness. I get that. But at the same time, if you care about the poor, which of course the Pope does, and he says he does, wouldn't you think that he'd have more admiration for the best system in the world history of bringing poor people out of?
Now, the thing is, I also notice, if you watched in this video here, when they show President Trump meeting with the Pope of Rome, one thing
Their
that
problem.
I found very interesting is that every picture I've seen with President Trump and the Pope has this very unhappy looking face. But the video clearly shows they were like best friends. And even as the former Robert Jeffress, spiritual advisor to President Trump, says they came out as best friends forever. Are you guys following where we're going here? Then you have also Great to Serve with Friends, Francis Chan, Rick Warren, Platt David, Bruce Frank. That's James McDonald, another spiritual advisor to President Trump, and he is serving with friends and includes Rick Warren as one of those. Do you know that Rick Warren has been selected by the Pope of Rome to be the spokesman for them to unite the evangelicals together? I forget the exact title of that, so it's not exactly the right way. We know Kenneth Copeland also played a leading role in bringing the evangelicals together to support the Pope of Rome, which, by the way, was right before the time of the Pope going to Israel in 2014 and drinking upon God's holy mountain, Mount Zion. All right? Then we have another one here. We'll come back down to this here in just a moment. This is Michelle Bachmann right here, officially leaves her church. You have to understand, Michelle Bachmann is kind of an interesting character. I did a video about her one time when she stood up against Obama for the sake of Israel. I really felt like that God had used her in a very interesting way there. But when it comes down time to take a side, to stand with the truth of God's Word, or be a politician and side with the New World Order, Michelle Bachmann began to change. I thought it was kind of interesting because Michelle Bachmann, she left back in 2011. She left her church that clearly she'd been a member of for 10 years. In the final 2 years, up into at the time of her official resignation, her and her husband from the church there, her church had always taught that the Pope was the Antichrist. At least the news stories always put it that way. Michelle wrote me a series of several letters. When I did the second video, not the first one, but the second one, about her and how she played, I thought, was a very important role when she stood up to President Obama in demanding that there be a respect to Israel. And then she wrote me and said she would like to have it removed. I knew then. I kind of quizzed her a little bit, so we went back and forth in emails discussing some issues there. But I had a feeling there was some kind of aspiration that she was looking at. At that time, President Trump was running for president, already in the running against Hillary Clinton, and I felt like that perhaps she might be a hopeful that she would be a VP pick of his. After all, if he put a woman on the ticket, that might give him a better edge over Hillary Clinton. She wasn't chosen, though, to be VP pick, but nonetheless, she was trying to distance herself from any groups that religiously oppose the Catholic Church. Well, this article right here goes very interesting into that. It says, Bachmann had listed her membership in the church of her campaign site for Congress in 2006. She lists no church affiliation on her campaign website or her official congressional website. Hukmat said in the change in membership is not out of the ordinary. Yeah, people are on the books as members, but then they have gone to another church. They may not be attending a church anywhere. There are all sorts of circumstances. But anyway, Pastor, let me drop down. Pastor, I'm trying to find the part here because the Catholic Church exonerates her. Let's see, the Bachmann campaign declined to immediately respond to the request for further comment Friday. Becky Rognes, a spokesperson in the Bachmann Congressional Office, said the Congresswoman now attends a non-denominational church in Stillwater area, but did not know the name of the church, how long she had been attending. Huthmat said that my understanding of the situation was the timing of the request for release was far more coincidental than strategic. Here we go. We identify the Antichrist as the papacy. The denomination website says this is an historical judgment based on Scripture. The Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights issued a statement Thursday about Bachman's denomination, saying it's regrettable that there are still strains of anti-Catholicism in some Protestant circles, but we find no evidence of any bigotry on the part of Republican Michelle Bachmann. The statement continued. Indeed, she has condemned the anti-Catholicism, just as President Barack Obama is not responsible for the views of Reverend Jeremiah Wright. Again, she made sure she got on the Catholic train. I find this so interesting as these things unfold. Ralph Reed, another spiritual advisor to President Trump, Pope Francis sets example for the GOP. You got to be kidding me. And then, of course, we have this famous video that I shared with you guys not too long ago, Pope Francis kissing the elite's hands in Israel at the very Holocaust Memorial Museum. He kisses the hands of several different leaders there, including the Rothschilds and other elites. And as we know, the Pope Francis sent his own Secretary of State to the Bilderberg meeting there in Italy. There is definitely a New World Order agenda here. Now, we also have, let me jump back, stop the video here. We also have here as well, Pope calls for a New World Order. This is what I was talking about. And if you've got President Trump, all of his spiritual advisors, practically everyone, not all of them, but practically everyone. We're talking about even Paula White, another spiritual advisor, all of these people having one way or another some kind of connection, or they're close friends, like Paula White close to Kenneth and Gloria Copeland there, all connected to the Vatican. And Pope calls for a New World Order. UN failure to halt U.S. war on Iraq leads to a new initiative. Pope John Paul launched one of the most important diplomatic initiatives of his long papacy yesterday when he called for a new international order to replace the one emerged from a Second World War. All right, that's Pope John Paul II that did that. And but Pope Francis also doing the same thing. Pastor John Hagee. Now, this is interesting because, as we know, it was President Trump that brought about having the embassy moved to Jerusalem. Now, as I said to you, I wasn't against moving the embassy to the Jerusalem either. Technically, we never moved an embassy. All we did was rename the building that was already there. I believe it was a consulate office there for the United States. But nonetheless, we now officially call that the U.S. Embassy. Well, this got praised by many people, but also much criticism from around the world. But yet at the same time, while this was all happening, there was one man that was there to lead the prayers, John Hagee. All right? Now, here's what's interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for those stirring words.
As John Hagee goes up to pray,
a closing benediction, I'd like to call
John Hagee,
can we stand?
who has been a critic of the Catholic Church for decades. He's the very man allowed to open up the prayer of dedication of the U.S. Embassy. But, do you remember about John Hagee in his letter of apology to the Vatican itself, May 12, 2008? Catholic League for Civil and Religious Rights, responding to William Donohue because they're about to shut him completely down. By the way, if you're a 501c corporation, which I'm sure John Hagee is, so he can get all the money tax-free, you can't speak against the Catholic Church. That is against a 501c corporation rights. Watch what he writes to Mr. Donohue. This is John Hagee's own letter. Insofar as some of my past statements regarding the Roman Catholic Church have raised concerns in your community, I am writing in a spirit of mutual respect and reconciliation to clarify my views. Out of desire to advance greater unity among Catholics and evangelicals in promoting the common good, I want to express my deep regret for any comments that Catholics have found hurtful. After engaging in constructive dialogue with Catholic friends and leaders, I now have an improved understanding of the Catholic Church, its relation to the Jewish faith, and the history of anti-Catholicism. In my zeal to oppose anti-Semitism and bigotry in all its ugly forms, I have often emphasized the darkest chapters of the history of the Catholic and Protestant relations with the Jews. In the process, I may have contributed to the mistaken impression that the anti-Jewish violence of the Crusades and Inquisition defines the Catholic Church. It most certainly does not. I don't think the Inquisitions are really over, personally. He also goes on, it is important to note that there were thousands of righteous Catholics, both clergy and laymen, who risked their lives to save Jews from the Holocaust, according to many scholars, including historian Martin Gilbert and Rabbi David Dalen, author of The Myth of the Hitler's Pope. Pope Pius XII personally intervened to save Jews. Yeah, the elite ones. Don't forget that. He definitely did at the very end there. John Carnwell, read his book. He was writing the book to defend Pope Pius XII. He was a strong advocate for the Catholic Church and wanted to write a book to defend him. But when they give him the access to the archives of Pope Pius XII, he uncovered the most cynical relationship with Pope Pius XII that you could ever imagine. Every apologist has tried to counter what this man wrote. He was a British journalist, and he definitely uncovered the truth. And yes, Pope Pius XII, I did discover he did rescue some Jews. But it's kind of interesting. Moshe Sharit, one of those that went and thanked him personally for rescuing him, along with Ben Gurion, who was also rescued by the Pope there through an order, through a secret channel that got him to Israel. These were men that were being rescued after their own people, their own Jewish members were selling them out to the Nazis, selling their families out by the tens of thousands to be murdered instead, while they got to go free. In addition, I better understand that reference to the Roman Catholic Church as the apostate church and the great whore described in the book of Revelation is rhetoric device long employed in anti-Catholic literature and commentary. I hope you recognize that I have repeatedly stated that my interpretation of Revelation leads me to conclude that the apostate church and the great whore appear only during the 7 years of the tribulation after all true believers, Catholic and Protestant, have been taken up to heaven. Therefore, neither of these phrases can be synonymous with the Catholic Church, as John Hagee has so stated. What a bunch of garbage. In recent decades, Catholics and evangelicals of goodwill have worked together to defeat the evil of communism, promote what Pope John Paul II called a culture of life. They started it. What do you figure? Don't need to read any more of John Hagee's letter. I'll post it in the section below. By the way, one thing I am doing when I put these letters up, put these links in, I'm taking away the www dot whatever or the http dot or colon. I take that off now because I notice YouTube will not allow the link for you to be able to directly go to these. So when you copy and paste it, I skip a line so it keeps you from having to copy two different websites there, but that way you can put it into your search, your URL bar there, and you can add what you need to in order to go to those websites. Again, we're still dealing with the border issues, though. Mayors from New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, Austin, and more denied entry into the Tornillo, Texas detention facility where immigrant children are living in a tent city. You know, they're not ready for you to visit everything, only what Melania Trump, when she goes and went there. This was the big issue that they're really worried about right now, is this jacket here that the First Lady wore here, as you can see. And I guess the jacket from Zara has already got the comment written on there. It's probably part of some kind of style or fashion. But she was wearing this jacket as she got on the plane. And you can see the writing on the back. And this is what it actually says. I really don't care, do you? And like I said, you know, maybe it wasn't intentional. And she did change her jacket when she came off. She still wore the same clothes as they pointed out. They said the same shoes. Everything was the same as far as that. The only thing that she did change, though, was the jacket itself. But that's just, like I said, that's just... It wasn't wise regardless of how that happened, but I'm not here to criticize her on that issue there myself. This was another issue that came up as well, and again, this was during the time of Obama was president. Mass graves of immigrants found in Texas, but state says no laws were broken. So like I said, this has been going on a long time, even before President Trump. The only thing with President Trump is it only got worse. In fact, before I bring you into this one, when it was Obama as president, let me play to you what Jeff Sessions said. And of course, Jeff Sessions working for President Trump back in May 2018. And this is when these attorneys said it went nuts on the number of children being separated from families, and the caseloads were enormous amount of caseloads that there was just no way. They said they spent 5 minutes and that was it. And children going into detention centers while the families were being tried as criminals. Listen to what Jeff Sessions had to say in this particular video here.
If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
All right, so that was the issue right there. They say smuggling a child. That's because they said in other words, if you're not carrying your child's birth certificate with you, then they're going to consider that you're smuggling the child. Regardless if the child can identify as parents or not, makes no difference. Regardless when the children are screaming and begging for their parents to be back with their parents, that's what was happening. So, and of course, we know that Jeff Sessions is also the one that's quoting Romans 13 as his justified reason for taking these children away. But under Obama administration, this is something that Democracy Now! Had reported, that they had been discovering these unmarked graves. Unbelievable information. Listen to this.
Month. Crystal Williams of the American Immigration Lawyers Association told HuffPost Live what happened.
They were given a double dose just there of the hepatitis.
First part here was the vaccines. These are being forced vaccines given to these children that are supposed to only be detained temporarily while their parents get deported back to their country of origin.
There's a vaccine. Many of them very likely already had a hepatitis A vaccine just a couple of days before. The whole thing was inexplicable, but at the same time, very emblematic of what has been going on there. Incidentally, several of the children did develop problems from the vaccinations. Whether it was from the Hep A or not, we don't know, because there were 4 to 6 vaccinations given to each child. But there were a couple of children whose legs swelled so much that they were unable to walk. There was a child with severe vomiting and diarrhea. And the solution to this, as it was to everything, or is to almost everything in the facility, is drink more water. That's the answer to everything. Drink more water.
And in the latest scandal, Texas has claimed there was no evidence of wrongdoing. When the bodies of immigrants found miles inland from the Mexican border were placed in mass graves. The bodies were gathered from the desert surrounding a checkpoint in Falfurrias, Texas, in Brooks County. An investigation was launched after the mass graves were exposed last November in a documentary by the Weather Channel in partnership with Telemundo and the Investigative Fund. In this clip, reporter John Carlos Frey speaks with Dr. Krista Latham of the University of Indianapolis at one of the sites where scores of migrant bodies were buried.
They're unmarked, they're unidentifiable, and there's no information on these individuals. We anticipate at least several hundred may still be buried within the cemetery.
As I investigate why so many lost migrants are dying in Brooks County, I hear about forensic teams from Baylor and Indianapolis universities who've spent the past 2 years exhuming migrant bodies.
I just feel like everybody deserves to be mourned properly. They still have
parents or siblings or spouses or children that are wondering what happened to them. So we're doing this for the families.
For years, the previous sheriff would give the bodies to a funeral home that charged taxpayers over $1,000 per body, then buried them, anonymously, in a corner of this cemetery.
Can you describe what kinds of bags the individuals were buried in?
There are biohazard bags, trash bags.
Just regular trash bags?
Trash bags. What we found last year, there were coffins that were right next to each other on all four sides because there were so many people buried in that area.
So as we can see, the migrants coming in, so many of them just dying like that, and then of course being buried the way they are in mass graves and stuff. So there's just all kinds of issues that have been happening. And of course that's not dealing with a separation, but of course they bring in the issue on Democracy Now! About the forced vaccinations as well. So who knows? Who knows what happens? How many children, though, may have been dying from even these forced vaccinations that have been happening in the camps? There's so many unanswered questions as to what's going on. And no, President Trump does not carry all the blame, by no means, about what has happened. This has happened under Obama. This happened under Clinton. But under Obama's administration is when the secret Walmart facilities began to surface back in 2015 and become known more so as a quote-unquote conspiracy theory, but now that information has been brought more and more to light. So our issue is that if you can have all these detention facilities to start with, then we need to be able to at least be able to come back, deal with this as families, and keep them together until they are deported if they are not found to be able to get asylum in our country. This is what really should be done. But as I said, there's definitely a New World Order agenda that is really in the making. Has this just been a test run to see if we can get away, if the government can get away with separating families, putting children in one place? Are we able to handle the influx of when they do this to American citizens for some future issue, some future New World Order agenda? And clearly, as I have shared with you, all of President Trump's, nearly all of President Trump's, are very closely connected to the Pope of Rome, which is clearly in the direction of a New World Order. What side will you stand on? I would stand with Christ, with Yeshua himself. And no, I don't agree that every single person that is in politics has been handpicked by Yeshua himself to lead the nation, or to lead a county, or civil government, or something of that effect there. That's been a gross mistranslation of that passage. By the way, it's actually the word liberty is what should be in place there. We'll talk about that in another broadcast. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live. Erev Tov in a world of Ein Shalom. There is no peace.